Welcome to part 2 of the video. In the last video I left off just finishing up some of the non-metallic gold parts, and now I'm moving on to the ropes. I do all these ropes the same way. I start from a base coat of VGC Heavy Red, which is from their extra opaque range, and then I highlight from that up to Orange Fire. Now I start on the red cloth sections of the model. I start with a mix of Bloody Red and Black, and I use that instead of VGC's Heavy Red because the Heavy Red has got quite a pink tone to it, which I'm not too fond of for cloth. And from here I highlight by adding in more and more Orange Fire. Now I'm just using a mix of pure Orange Fire just to get those top highlights right at the edge. Now I've base coated the other side of the cloth with khaki brown. And I highlight this colour by adding in ivory, which is a VGC model air colour. It's actually a paint that's designed to go in an airbrush, but it doesn't matter because we want to keep our mixes quite thin anyway. You can see how naturally thin these airbrush paints are, as I haven't thinned this down at all. So I've glued that onto the main part of the miniature now, and I'm going to start work on the belt. I'm using grey paints similarly to the way that I used brown paints for the gold. Starting dark, I'll work up to highlights and then smooth them out. So I thought it was starting to look a bit too medium grey, so what I did was just get a glaze of black and start bringing the tone down a little bit. Now some final highlights using a mix that's almost pure white. Now I'm going to be doing this part quite bright green. I've base coated it with a heavy black green, which is a Vallejo extra opaque paint, and I'm using the loaded brush technique to highlight using moon yellow through to green. If you want a more vibrant effect, you can just repeat the process over and over. Now for the head, I'm just using the same techniques that I used in all the other blue power armour. A mixture of glazes and loaded brush technique and just everything really. So this is what it looks like after the final highlights. I actually came back to it because I felt that the blue was a little bit pale, so I brought that colour back down again by using glazes of Imperial Blue. So I use the same colours as before. I base coat with khaki and I'm highlighting up to pure ivory. Now initially I started doing this with the paintbrush, but in the end I just found that it was taking way too long for a result that I could have easily gotten with the airbrush. So I got the airbrush out, and over the top of the khaki base coat I put pure ivory on the areas that the light's going to hit the most, and then I add in the shadows using camo medium brown, which is also a Vallejo model air colour. I also do the gold band on the cloak in the same way that I did the other golds, and then I glue it on. I've also base coated the back with red. I didn't cover the top of the helmet because it took me quite a long time to get the white exactly how I wanted it, and the shoulder pads were done using the same methods that I've shown already. Now for the gun, I base coat this with Cold Grey, the parchment with snakebite leather, this bit with a mixture of Warlord purple and black, this with Imperial Blue, this with heavy black green, and the black bits with black obviously. Now slightly different to the other metal techniques that I used, I decided I wanted to go from a light colour and try and glaze my way down to black. I'll start with a black wash to make those darkest recesses stand out. So once it's dry and I can see the dark recesses in there, I use a black glaze and I go from light to dark to create shadows. Once you've created sufficient shadows, you can take the original grey colour and start to bring that back for highlights. Now for this little screen on the arm, I'm starting from heavy black green and I'm mixing in yellow for the highlights. Any yellow will do the job, but I use Vallejo Game Colour Moon Yellow. For these areas I start with snakebite leather and I add in bone white for the highlights. For the purity seals I start with a mix of black and warlord purple, and from that mix I add in white for the highlights. I decided to do the scope red, starting from Heavy Red, highlighting up to Bloody Red, and then a final highlight using Orange Fire. For the lens in the scope, I start with heavy black green and highlight by adding in moon yellow to the mix. For the strap, I use charred brown base coat and highlight through to snakebite leather. So that's it for part 2 of the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching.